All right, gather round because today we're taking a road trip straight into the dark, eerie heart of American folklore. We're exploring the seriously chilling phenomenon of phantom automobiles. But more importantly, this explainer is going to show you exactly how to bring these historic terrors back to life on screen using modern filmmaking techniques. Okay, let's dive into this. Picture a lonely highway at midnight. To your left, a completely barren moor. To your right, trees just trembling in the wind. And then, suddenly, an automobile materializes directly in your path. As rancher Bob Hill described it after a terrifying encounter in California back in 1928, from its radiator and sides, it gives forth a soft, strange, iridescent light, as though it had been coated with phosphorus. You're wondering whether your soul has passed on to its destiny. But when you actually slam on the brakes, there's no other car there. You've just met a phantom automobile. I mean, it's an incredible piece of folklore, right? But as visual storytellers, we don't just want to tell the story, we want to show it. So what happens when the ghosts of the past meet the technology of the future? How do we take a nearly century-old ghost story and use today's lighting, audio, and visual effects to make our audience actually jump out of their seats? Go ahead and put on your director's hat, because we're going to build this scene step by step. To really get this, we've got to look back at the history for a second. Soon after the invention of the car, isolated communities suddenly found their worlds shrinking. Cars allowed strangers, and let's be honest, criminals, to strike fast and vanish into the night. And that very real-world anxiety quickly morphed into the supernatural. Americans essentially just adapted the older folklore of the phantom carriage to fit this new, ground-shaking technology of the horseless carriage. And sightings absolutely exploded across the country. In 1905, a muffled woman in a white touring car was seen tearing through Shenley Park in Pittsburgh. By 1914, phantom cars were being tied to masked bandits in Minneapolis. Then in 1917, Geneva, New York was completely terrorized by Ghostina, a haunted car that would mysteriously vibrate and shake at 2 a.m., complete with vaporous figures sitting right in the front seat. And by the 1920s, the Sacramento Valley became this massive hotspot for ghost cars, causing near-miss collisions. So if we're setting up our own scene, we need a desolate, eerie location that really captures that historic isolation. We're going to draw inspiration from the vast, empty stretches of Nevada. Think of Highway 50, the one famously dubbed the loneliest road in America. Or maybe State Route 375, the extraterrestrial highway, which is already famous for UFO sightings and basically zero traffic. A pitch-black, empty desert road is our canvas here. All right, moving on to Section 1, Lighting the Darkness. Lighting is literally everything in horror. If you show too much, it's not scary at all. But if you show too little, it kind of just looks like a production mistake. So, the absolute first rule of horror filmmaking: ditch your traditional three-point lighting setup. We do not want a perfectly illuminated subject. Instead, we're going to use low-key lighting. This means using a single, hard key light to carve deep, harsh shadows across our subject's face. We want maximum contrast between our character and the terrifying environment they're trapped in. So to build out this lighting package, we'll rely heavily on backlighting. By throwing a light source behind our phantom car and pumping a ton of fog onto the set, we create this moody, terrifying silhouette. You want just a tiny touch of background lighting so it doesn't look like a flat stage play. And honestly, you can even experiment with oversaturated blue gels to give the moonlight this intensely unnatural, tense vibe. Now, imagine your protagonist steps out of their broken-down car to look around. This is where we use the spotlight effect. Having them search the darkness with a flashlight not only limits what the audience can see, which builds massive tension, by the way, but the harsh uplighting from the beam reflecting back distorts their facial features, making them look almost alien. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how we actually build this atmosphere digitally. We can't just use flat 2D smoke. We need volumetric fog. Visual effects artists use tools like Perlin Noise, which basically creates these random organic patterns. It allows the digital fog to actually react to wind and pool heavily around the tires, exactly like real steam and water particles would naturally behave right near the cold ground. And when those headlights finally break through the fog, we've got to manipulate how the lighting behaves. Instead of sticking to strict real-world physics, we're going to take an art-driven approach. We select specific opposing colors to give those headlights that exact soft, strange, iridescent glow that Bob Hill described all the way back in 1928. Okay, on to Section 2, Designing the Scare. We've got the visual look totally locked in, But any horror pro will tell you that the real secret to making the audience jump out of their skin isn't just what they see, it's what they hear. Here is the exact anatomy of a professional jump scare. First, we set the baseline with quiet ambient wind and maybe the metallic ticking of a cooling engine. Then, as the phantom car approaches, we introduce a riser, a sound that constantly builds in speed and volume. Then, absolute silence. You literally pull the audio out entirely to lull the audience into submission. Finally, when the car strikes, you hit them with a massive, deafening stinger. For your audio toolkit, you'll want to experiment with screeching metallic strings, or maybe some reverse piano effects for those risers. And for your stingers, try heavy wooden thuds or sharp stabs. Professional sound designers will literally live with these mixes for days, swapping out different hits and rhythms until the audio perfectly, seamlessly matches the pacing of the visual edit. Which brings us to section 3, finishing touches, fog and shake. So, the audio is booming, the lighting is terrifying, and now we just need the final technical polish to make the moment of impact feel raw, chaotic, and dangerously real. I'm talking about camera shake. If we're editing this scene in Premiere Pro, applying a camera shake effect means the entire frame is going to bounce around. If you don't adjust your scale, the audience will see the black, empty edges of the video frame as it shakes, which completely shatters the illusion. You must apply the transform effect and bump your clip's scale up to at least 115. But wait, you can't forget motion blur. Without it, the shake just looks cheap and highly digital. Inside those same transform effect settings, you need to uncheck Use Composition Shutter Angle and manually crank your shutter angle to 360 degrees. This creates a cinematic, buttery motion blur that makes the violent shaking feel incredibly, almost uncomfortably realistic. So the crucial point is how we animate this. Do not use uniform patterns. You set your initial position keyframe, move exactly 3 frames forward on your timeline, and shift the position slightly. Let's say left and down. Move 3 more frames, shift it up and right. The shake has to be entirely random to avoid looking mechanical. It needs to simulate pure, unadulterated human panic. And finally, we have the star of the show. If we're generating our phantom vehicle completely digitally, we need an optimized, ultra-high-quality 3D model of a classic 1970s American muscle car. We're talking meticulously crafted 4K textures and highly detailed headlights so that when this digital beast gets right up in the camera's face, it feels physically imposing and undeniably real. We've taken a century-old fear of the unknown on America's dark highways and rebuilt it from the ground up, using low-key lighting, volumetric fog, precision audio mixing, and digital camera techniques. You now have the exact blueprint to manipulate light, sound, and motion. So the only question left is, will you use these tools to simply retell a ghost story, or are you ready to craft America's next great phantom legend? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.